they were finally copied, that we took on Tuesday. Okay. One of the reasons I give these is, I cannot understand this. It's like the lights. I've been in this for a year now, and I still can't work these things. There are several reasons for these quizzes. I want you to understand they're not just busy work, okay, although it seems like it. One is attendance. If you're not here or you're late, you don't have to take it. It kind of helps with people, encourages people to be here on time. The other, as we talked about when I gave it the other day, is to make you realize that any kind of reading in any college class is not just a matter of passing the words in front of your eyes and saying, okay, I read that, okay? Sure, you can read the words, but what we're working on in here is making sure we understand it and making sure we are working on remembering it and putting it together with other knowledge that we gain in college, okay? So this is partly, as it said up here, the more often you have occasion to remember what you've read, the better you will make it part of your own prior knowledge, okay? Like we talked about with the several things we've seen about the Civil War. This isn't a history class, but this stuff comes up, and you kind of want to know, okay, yeah, I do know something about that. It helps you make sense of everything else you learned. Okay, the other reason I give them is I do like to talk, because this is a reading class, I do like to talk a little bit about test taking. I have students who say to me, oh, you know, I'm okay on writing papers and stuff, but I'm really bad at taking tests. I believe a lot of that problem is reading. I think it's a reading thing. I think you kind of have to learn to approach a test the same way you approach a reading and writing exercise, okay? So again, one of the things to do on these is read direction, read through the whole test first, okay, remember that? And then read all questions and answers carefully. One of the reasons for that is that there may be a clue in one of the other questions to one that you're not sure of. So, and sometimes I do that on purpose, sometimes the quizzes don't have that, okay? But I always like it when someone goes back in and they've marked one here, and then they go back and say, oh yeah, now wait a minute, and go back up and change it, okay? Then it shows me that you made that connection with the other answer, okay? So this, most people did pretty well on this, despite how long ago that was. And one of the reasons that was easy, or should have been easy, is do you remember ever hearing this list before? Again, yeah. Does anyone recognize that list? That is a list that you will learn about when you get into philosophy classes and humanities classes. Anybody know that list? What's that? What are those 5? That's 5 of 7 things. Those are 5 of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, they are the sins.
Yeah, those are 5 of the 7 deadly sins. So in some people's minds, like, yeah, I've heard that list before. But yeah, so be careful. And that's the other thing about these quizzes. That is a famous list. But you don't want to just say, okay, I recognize that list, so this must be right. Think about it. Did we talk about that in this class? No. This should have been, we talked about that enough, that even if you didn't remember all 5, you could have said, oh yeah, now I don't think we said this was one of the main reasons we buy the products, okay? So again, reading these things, like the human nature, again, when we see a quiz that all we have to do is circle things, we tend to not take it as seriously as something that we have to write an answer for. So your impulse is to just go down and circle these. read the whole thing through, consider all the answers, okay? Most people got this right, I was glad to see, okay? These weren't true, right? People started getting a little bit confused when we got to the people, the people and the history stuff. Mary Surratt may have been a polygamist, but I don't think she was. I've never heard that she was, but it's not to say she wasn't. But is this what we read about her? Did we learn that about her in the reading about Mary Surratt? No. So a lot of people circled this, okay? Here's a name that also appears down here, and yeah, this was a good thing. And I think what happened down here was this. But this was one where some people had circled this, and then they got down here and said, oh yeah, wait a minute. He was this president, right? Okay, so yeah, so this was kind of a clue that this wasn't the right answer, and she was the one who was hanged for her part in Lincoln's assassination. One of the things we're dealing with here is, has anyone ever been interested, this is a very interesting thing throughout the years, in the similarities that have been found between Lincoln's assassination and Kennedy's assassination. There were a lot of things where they were almost exactly 100 years apart. Both of them were succeeded by a vice president named Johnson. It's kind of spooky. They were both like the same age or something. There are all these other things that people have written up. You can go and look for it.
Well, actually, I think that was just a coincidence.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So there's kind of this weird connection between Kennedy's assassination and Lincoln's assassination. And in this class, we just happen to be reading about both, okay? And then Mary Surratt, remember I talked a little bit, we didn't read about it, but maybe I didn't in this class. The fact that one of the things that pointed to her was she owned this boarding house across the street from the theater. And that's where all these people, those other guys, would go to meet. So there's kind of a conspiracy. There's this, argument there was a conspiracy. It's interesting. Okay, this one, most people, I think only one person got mixed up on this. And here's the other thing, you at least I don't know about you guys, when I look at these quizzes, when I first see numbers, I think, oh God, I'm never going to remember that, I don't really remember that number. I'm really bad at numbers. But the answer here is it doesn't matter whether you specifically remember the 20 billion and 1 million. You know what I'm saying? Don't look at this and say, okay, forget it. I can't answer that question because I don't remember numbers. Do you remember talking about this at all? The other two? You see what I'm saying? Even if you don't remember the exact numbers, you can still get this right because your strongest guess is, yeah, we talked about that the Civil War cost a lot of money and a lot of lives. So that kind of, even though you don't know these things or you don't remember those numbers, still you can get the right answer. Okay, and this one, another thing you want to notice when you get this kind of test or any test, we talked about this a little bit with the vocabulary exercises in the book. It's true for any class, kind of learn how your different teachers put tests together. You know what I'm saying? What's going to be on here? Some of this stuff is from the reading, some of it's from our vocabulary quizzes. So that kind of gives you a clue as to what future quizzes like this are going to contain. Okay? So these were from readings, this is from a vocabulary quiz. Okay? And I made little notes here. This, on some of them, this was right. Yeah, this person backed up, that was good, and figured it out. This is poly, this is polygamy, this is, how do you pronounce that one? B-I-G-A-M-Y, how do you pronounce that? It's kind of hard to see it to say it when I'm saying it rather than, remember, so this is polygamy, this is, how do you pronounce that?
Bigamy?
Bigamy, that's
Bigamy.
bigamy, remember? Yeah, so it's funny pronunciations. And how do you pronounce that one? Monogamy, yeah. They're not like, you know, if you're learning in the reading lab to sound things out, that's what Paula Norton was talking about. Some words you can, like that anti-disestablishmentarianism. That's easy to sound out, no matter how long it is. But these, you go, okay, monogamy, it doesn't work. So this is pronounced monogamy. Okay, and then this one, it was interesting how many people circled A on this. Did we ever talk about the tallest building in the world? No, okay. How many people have heard about that though, now that our new Twin Towers has been replaced? Have people been following that? They finally got that replacement building for the Twin Towers.
It's called the Freedom Tower?
Yeah, they finally got, it's a single building and it's like the 7th tallest in the world. It's the tallest in the United States, but it's the 7th tallest in the world. The tallest one is in Dubai. And if you ever go and look at pictures of that, has anyone seen that one? It's just, because that's out there on that, you know, that's in the desert. That's over there in the desert. And it's weird because there's just this desert and then there's this huge building. It's just, I had a student one semester who had actually been up to the top of that in an elevator. That would scare me. Okay, so yeah, we didn't talk about that. A form of prejudice that keeps minorities and women from being promoted. Again, have we ever seen this phrase in this class? Yeah, so you can kind of do this by process of elimination. Okay, I'm not really sure what she's saying here, but I don't think we talked about Dubai, and I don't think we talked about the debt ceiling. So even if you don't really understand this one, you can kind of figure out by process of elimination which one is right. Okay, yeah, and again, this was a purposely trying to trick you, so you kind of had to think back, and this person did a good job of crossing that out. And it was interesting because most people got this one right, but I was kind of, and I'm thinking that this person circled this and then read this question and said, oh yeah, Johnson was the one with the TV, so that must have been during Vietnam. Did we have TV during the Civil War? No, we didn't have electricity during the Civil War. Okay, so again, the dates, the connection with the 60s, Vietnam, and that kind of thing. Use these answers within themselves to help you. Like I say, I'm always happy when I see somebody do this, because that means they're considering all of this information. Okay? So we will have some more of these every once in a while. Again, these are not in your syllabus. You need to be here to do them and make an effort to use that as a way to, again, go back to some of this stuff that we read. Again, this isn't a history class. However, as some of you may have already be finding, in a history class, that is going to be a much bigger, that kind of thing is going to be a much bigger part of your grade than it is in here. This, I haven't talked about this yet, and I kind of want to give you some teacher's vocabulary words so that you know what I'm talking about. This class, there are two different kinds of classes in college. This class is what is called a skills class. You are learning to read college level material and remember and understand it and remember it. So the content, the Mary Surratt or whatever, on your final, on your midterm and your final, that's not going to be a history thing. It's not going to say, when did Mary Surratt live? You're just going to have to read something and use these strategies on it. But when you get into what's called a content class, that's your psychology class, your history class, your sociology class. There, what you're being tested on is the content. Your grade is going to be whether you remember that stuff. So that's what we are trying to prepare you for, is how to learn that information when basically a lot of those classes are just come to class, listen to the teacher, take notes, then twice a year you take a test. In many of those classes, the history and sociology, there aren't any other quizzes or papers. You just have to take a test on what you have absorbed. So that's what we're trying to help you do. Okay, so, whoops, let me see, get papers back to some other people. Okay, so that was the PK quiz. And, like I say, we'll see some more of those. Okay, now we're going to go to this. Okay, we are at a, what should I call it? We're at a new module, okay? We've been working on this for 2 weeks, talking about writing paraphrases and making marginal notes, okay? Not everyone is 100% on this, and we're not going to stop working on it. We're going to continue to do these things. But as we work through these modules, we're going to add some work, okay? So we are now moving into the module, and that's what this is, Introduction to Module 4 that we're doing today, that introduces the concept of discovering and naming the topic of a piece of reading, okay? So I always like to let students know where we've been and where we're going. So this is what we've done so far. We started off with the complete sentences idea, and as you can see, that I am referring to that constantly, both in your writing and because some people are still writing paraphrases that are just fragments. So then I can just say fragment, this isn't a complete sentence. That's why I start out with that, because before, when I didn't start out with complete sentences, we'd get to this point and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how do I explain to these people? I have to stop and start all over again about fragments. So you guys all have that language, and you understand that if I write fragment, it means your paraphrase is not a complete sentence, and you need to make it one. Okay, so as far as the reading strategies, we've talked about using context clues to find word meanings. That was all that homework you did in the book. And also, I didn't even put this, context clues and word parts. We're still working on that. We're still looking at some of those word parts, okay? We've talked about highlighting, and we are still working on that. Right now, we're just highlighting to see what's repeated, see if there are reversal transitions, see if there are lists, see if there are addition transitions, okay? And we've introduced making marginal notes. And what people are finding, and what I wrote on a lot of papers this time, was be sure that you are really thinking in terms of the notes, because if you have done those notes well, your paraphrase is going to be easy. That's what leads to writing, that they're not disconnected. I see a lot of people, you know, I kind of come around and look at what you're doing, and I see a lot of people trying to write the paraphrase first, and I say, wait a minute, you know what, that's going to be a lot easier if you do that other work. That's the whole point, do that while you're reading, okay? So these are the things that we have introduced so far. These are, so you already have a lot of these strategies, which is another word for skills, under your belt. What I do in the reading and writing exercises is I keep adding those things, all right? This week, what I'm going to ask you to do again on the reading and writing exercise is only up to here. Next week, we are going to add this. Okay, so that won't be on your reading and writing exercise today, but starting next week it will be. With all the other stuff, we're not going to stop doing that and start doing just topics. You have to do all that stuff and then tell me what the topic is. Okay, so, yes.
Finding and praising?
Yes, phrasing, okay? So what's the difference between, good, what's the difference between this word, what's the difference between paraphrasing and phrasing?
One word?
Yeah, one is longer. Okay, yeah, we talked about that the word paraphrase, it means a little, something a little bit different. That's good, I mean, people are taking a good guess. That's the, yeah, it is, it's a longer word. But there's the same word in there, right? It's a longer form of a similar word. That's why I'm asking what's the difference.
No, but what I meant
Yeah.
is phrasing. What you mean by that is just to put down one word.
Well, no, it can be more than one word.
Okay.
A phrase, yeah. A phrase, in grammar, a phrase is shorter than a sentence. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A sentence has a subject, verb, complete idea, but remember, and we talked about that a little bit with the incomplete sentences. It's just a phrase, okay? And again, I didn't even mention these two things. The reading and writing paraphrasing, so in a sense you could say, who remembers the difference between these two types of paraphrase? What's a reading? When do you use a reading paraphrase? Do you remember that? That's what Lorraine Fleming calls it. I don't use that phrase, that phrase as often as she does. These are your reading paraphrases. It's what you write in the margin as you read. The writing paraphrase is the complete sentence. That's the difference between those. The reading paraphrases are these. And the writing paraphrases are complete sentences. Okay, good. So Luis did a good thing by calling our attention to that. When you phrase a topic, that, I'll show you this in a minute, that basically just means that you are going to tell me, I could also put this word here, you're just going to tell me that you see what the topic of the paragraph is. So I could have put stating there, phrasing and stating topics, okay? Yeah, so we have, Yvonne is frowning. You look like you're thinking, what is she talking about? So we're going to keep straightening it out. Okay, in your book, and remember this is the introduction to this module. So you have reading in the book. Please read that, okay? Do not attempt to do homework without reading the assigned pages, okay? Pretty much from here on in, you're mostly going to be using your book for reading. This stuff is all in your book, but the reason I give it out on handouts is obviously because most of you don't want to write all that stuff. You have to write on it, right? Most of you don't have the room to do that. So that's why I do this. I give this to you so you can write on it, okay? So we're starting, this is the start of your reading. I approach this a little bit differently from the way the writer of the book does. She has 3 things in one chapter. topics, main ideas, and topic sentences, okay? When I first taught this class, I tried to shoot through this whole chapter in one module, and I found people were just lost. So I separate it out. I do topics first, then main ideas, and then topic sentences. Okay, it works better that way for me. So we're gonna do part of this chapter for these 2 weeks. How to identify the topic of a paragraph, okay? So you could also, to use her words, we could also say here, we are identifying and stating topics, okay? What's the difference? Why do both this teacher and me, I, distinguish between topics and main ideas? What's the difference between a topic and a main idea? Anybody know that? A lot of students, when I say in my writing classes, I'll say, what's the topic? And somebody raises their hand and say, that's the main idea. It's not. What's the difference between a topic and a main idea?
A topic is just one word?
Yeah, a topic is a thing. It's one thing. The main idea, and here's where this doesn't become such a new concept. You'll find that as we go through these ideas as they are in the book, that I have purposely kind of already introduced you to this in the previous lesson, okay? So basically, if we look at our homework that we just turned in, okay, so Luis just handed me this. Okay, I'm trying to find one where we actually did the, okay, this is good. Write and Neshoba. Remember, we looked through here and we said, what's repeated over and over again? Write and Neshoba. That is the topic of this paragraph. Frances Wright and Neshoba is the topic. Does that make sense? To identify what the paragraph is about. This paragraph is about Frances Wright and Neshoba. Okay? So that's all we mean by phrasing or stating the topic. And again, I've already guided you to doing this. The way you find the topic of the paragraph is to identify what's being repeated or referred to most often. Okay? The difference in this homework is that you are actually going to be asked to write that down. After you do this, you're going to be asked to pull that topic out of your notes and answer for me. What is the topic? What is this paragraph about? Okay? In the one, remember the one about Mary Surratt and all that business about the ghost? Remember that paragraph that had all that stuff about the ghost? A lot of people, when they're faced with that paragraph, and I say to them, what's the topic? They say, oh, the topic of this paragraph is her ghost. But was it? Remember that? No. And that's what we're trying to solve in this class, is people read stuff that, remember the why we buy? The topic of that paragraph wasn't buying cell phones. But a lot of people, because you recognize the cell phone, that's something you're familiar with, and you say, oh, this paragraph is about buying cell phones when we don't really need them. That was just one example of one thing. No way was that what the paragraph was about. But that's what people tend to do. They tend to pull out something that's familiar and say, okay, this must be the topic. And it's not. And then you totally miss what's going on. Okay? So this is what we're going to be working on, finding the topic. But as I said, and you can kind of see from, I finally did get to copy this on a copier that did some highlighting, but now it's too, we'll look at it a little bit. It's too hard to see up here. But, okay, so you have this homework. What I do sometimes when I make copies of this, again, some people look at this and they say, oh, well, I don't need to read the book because she has everything on here. No. This is just one little bit of what you're going to read. You have to read those pages. Don't depend on this. But it is her summary of some of those pages. The topic is the person, place, event, or idea repeatedly mentioned or referred to. That you guys are already familiar with, right? We did that with when we were looking at the highlighting. Okay, we've been kind of doing that. It never pops up and then disappears. So Mary Surratt's ghost wasn't mentioned at the beginning of that paragraph, it was only at the end. Okay? Although one word can sometimes sum up the topic, you'll often need a couple of words or maybe three. Okay? Sometimes you have to come up with the words. So this one, we said could have been scuba diving in caves or cave diving, okay? And you could also add and dangers, scuba diving and cave diving and its dangers. Okay, that would have been the topic for this one. This one was Frances Wright and Neshoba. This one would have been, if I had asked you to find the topic for this, remember we saw how many times she was mentioned, so definitely Sandra Day O'Connor. But you could also have put Sandra Day O'Connor and her voting record. That's the topic of it. Not the fact that she was the first female justice. That just turned out to be minor information. Sandra Day O'Connor and her voting record. That would have been the topic of this one.
Can we see what I wrote?
What? No, you're fine. Because I wasn't asking you for the topic of this yet, okay? This one was obviously Lizzie. This could have just been Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden and her guilt or innocence, okay? But sometimes just Lizzie Borden works. And this was employees reward system. That's the topic, okay? So you're thinking, oh, this is easy. You know, all I have to do is come up with what is it about. Trickier than you think, as you will find, okay? So here's your homework, and I'm going to give you this, but you'll notice, again, I have done one for you. Another reason that I print these out and give these to you is that if you look in the book, you can find these in the book, but if you look at this exercise for Lorraine Fleming, all she wants you to do is read this and circle the topic. No, I want you to do more work. So that's another reason. You'll notice my directions are a different type font. So I have typed these directions. Read each paragraph, highlight and annotate, okay? And it says refer to your 2 handouts. Okay, I gave you that one that says Introduction to Paraphrasing. And I also have one, again, kind of as a checklist of notes from the last couple of weeks. That is a handout on making marginal notes. So hold on to this with me. Like I said, we're not leaving that behind. We're still going to work on making marginal notes. So read this over. This is stuff we talked about. It has that list on there of stuff you should look for. Okay. So we're going to go into these and do our same thing. Well, let me go ahead and hand this out to you so you don't start working on it yet. But I think this thing tends to pick up colors more heavily than other overhead projectors that I have. I think you guys can, the blue is not that dark on this. So you guys can probably read this better than here. So Thomas Edison is rightly famous for his brilliance as an, now here's a vocabulary word. How do you pronounce this word? You might have to look on your own.
Ingenious?
Yeah, ingenious inventor. I'm sorry, I went around you and didn't get one to you. Okay. So, among other things, he helped bring us electricity, phonographs, and motion pictures. So, just looking at that first sentence, he's rightly famous for his brilliance as an ingenious. Can you guess what that word means? What word does it sound like? It's not spelled exactly the same. Genius, his genius, yeah, he was a genius at it. As an inventor. He helped bring us electricity, phonographs, and motion pictures. So here's a list right here. Do you think this is going to talk about his invention of these three things? Maybe. This answers the question, why is he famous? Here's the three things he invented. But, and here's another thing that we need to watch for. The reversal transitions that we've seen up to now have pretty much come at the beginning of a sentence. But you also want to watch for them midway. Edison is less known, though, for his role in inventing the electric chair. Okay, so here's a reversal transition. All right. Here's some notes over here. What did he invent? Electricity, movies, record players. But then we go through it and say, what do we see repeated? Obviously, Edison, 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 and all the he's, he and his, okay? But we also see electric chair, electrocuted, electricity could provide a quick and painless death. That's a reference to electric chair. Experiments with the electric chair, okay, electric chair, okay. So, and here's a list. See if you can find the list, yes.
My mistake was electric chair. I was thinking of the electric wheelchair.
Okay, yes. And this is an interesting thing about some of these readings. Our culture today, we don't use the electric chair anymore. It's been considered by the Supreme Court, it's been ruled a cruel and unusual form of punishment. Okay, so now they do it more by lethal injection. So yeah, that's the thing. Our definition of electric chair today is somebody with a wheelchair. So yeah, be careful. This is the thing. You know, you want to be sure that you're not just assuming that they're talking about an electric wheelchair. Yes, you may read into it for quite a ways and say, wait a minute, what are they talking about? Okay, then go back and say, okay, oh, I see. They're looking for a method of execution other than hanging. So remember, Mary Surratt was hanged up until 1887. That was the only way they had to put people to death for murder. Okay? Does that make sense? So we're doing our same stuff. Then, here's what you have to do. Now, the way I work with this book is, and you'll find this over the next several homeworks, Lorraine Fleming, in her exercises, which I use, starts you off by circling one of a suggested list of topics. Okay, so we're not asking you yet to write them out by yourself. It's just like the vocabulary. Remember, she had some of those you circled what was the best vocabulary meaning. And some of you found in those exercises that a lot of those weren't what you would have necessarily put down, okay? But you can kind of guess, if you figured out how this class works, that the next time I ask you to do this after this homework, I'm going to ask you to write it out yourself. So this is the first part of it, okay? You can, and this kind of makes, what we want to talk about here is why these other answers aren't correct. Because just like with those vocabulary quizzes, what you'll find is it does talk about, it's not that Edison wanted to take credit for inventing the electric chair. Rather, he wanted the state of New York to use a generator made by his arch rival. What's an arch rival?
Your enemy.
Yeah, his enemy. You remember that word, like from, doesn't Batman have arch rivals? Yeah, his, in this case, his competitor, which was Westinghouse. Okay, he hoped the general public would grow fearful of Westinghouse products once it knew that prisoners were being Westinghoused to death. Okay, and so he was hoping that would become a buzzword, all right? And of course that didn't happen. So it does talk about this, his opponent, his rival with Westinghouse. Does it talk about this? The genius of Thomas Edison? Yeah, it says he was an ingenious inventor. But is this the topic? Is this what the whole paragraph talks about? Does that make sense to people? So some of these, you know, you're going to look at these and say, yeah, all of these are right. But that's where your work up here is going to come in. Look for the thing that's repeated most often, that's referred to most often. The rivalry is only mentioned down here. His genius is only really mentioned up here. It talks about it up here. Then it starts talking about the electric. So you're looking for the thing that's repeated or referred to most often. If you want to do this, you don't have to. But this is kind of a way, you notice I'm not asking you now to do this. I'm not asking you to do that necessarily. But ask yourself what the paragraph is about and what the author is trying to tell you about that thing. So that's what we've been doing here. And if you want to continue doing that, you can just do it as part of your notes. The point is that Edison invented the electric chair, not just the light bulb. So you can always still do that. I just didn't give you a specific place for it. Yes?
You have number 4 twice.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
It's just, yeah, it's just a number thing. Yeah, that should be 5 on the back. Yeah, I pick them out from different, I pick one sometimes she doesn't, I don't think that's another thing, I don't think her exercise is long enough. So I picked one from another exercise. Yeah, so this one should be number 5. Yeah, and then here is that would be actually number 6. So I picked these up from a couple of different exercises. As long as they're not the same paragraph, we're okay. Good. Okay, so that's your homework. Any questions about that? Again, remember, the way I do this is I introduce it briefly, this idea of finding the topic. You go home and do it, read the paragraph so that you have the information, give it a try, and then we'll come back and look at it on Tuesday. Okay? Okay, so now we need to move on to the stuff you're going to do today. We have a couple more word parts in front of me. We're kind of coming to the end of these exercises that have word parts in them. Again, these are coming out of that chapter 2 in your book. This is another one that goes across a number of languages. These 2 roots, am or amor, meaning one of these things. And remember that you're going to have to use the context, because these are 2 different things, right? Love and friendliness could be very different. So you're going to have to use the context of the sentence to figure out whether it means love or whether it means just friendliness. Okay? Does that make sense? Can you think of a word in Spanish that uses this to mean friendliness?
Amor.
What word in
Amor.
Spanish uses am? mean, I'm thinking Spanish because I could pick French. Anybody think of one in French?
But amor means love in
Yeah.
Spanish.
Well, I'm thinking of this one. Whoops. That's an M. Amigo, right?
Friend.
Yeah, that's Spanish. for
Yeah, it
me,
means friend.
okay? Yeah, and in French, amore, and then in French, and I think Italian, too, that's love. Okay? A friend, I don't know a whole lot of French, but I know a friend in French is just this. Okay, so that goes through a lot of languages. Okay, but you're gonna have to think about the English word. Can anyone think of an English word that uses this to mean?
Admirable?
Admirable,
Yeah.
that's a D.
Oh, okay.
That's a different one. What about, yeah, we don't have, it's not as common as these are in those languages.
Oh,
But
you
Sandra-
want us to
What?
find a word?
Yeah, that
Like
uses.
ammo in Spanish
In
In
means love too.
Spanish, yeah, yeah. But what about English?
America?
All right, that actually, that's, okay, that's interesting. Because where did we get this, where did that name came from?